So thank you for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully, you are here for some ideas about taking literacy outside. So this session is going to be on supporting literacy in the outdoors. My name is Tracy and I am the Assistant Education Officer at Blashford Lakes, which is a nature reserve near Ringwood, just on the western edge of Hampshire. And with me as well is Susan, who I'll let you say hello.
Hi, I'm Susan Simmons and I'm an engagement officer for the Wildlife Trust, usually based around Winchester, but obviously for the past year I've been doing everything online, so I'm based in the Wallops at the moment. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. I've been outside a little bit more, I think, than Susan, which is quite nice. Haven't done quite so much online teaching, done a little bit keeping in touch with our teenager group. But other than that, I've been doing a bit more kind of meet and greet on the nature reserve and chatting to visitors and things, and actually managed some pond dipping with families over the summer, which was really nice. But actual teaching seems like a long time ago now. So we'll see. I think that might be a bit interesting when that comes back round again, but something to look forward to. So we will make a start. So just a little bit about us as an organisation. So at Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, we're one of 46 wildlife trusts working across the UK. We make space for wildlife. So at the moment, we look after more than 50 nature reserves and other land across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, trying to create a growing network of wildlife havens across the two counties. We bring wildlife back from the brink. So despite national declines, our work is also improving the fortunes of important species like Duke of Burgundy butterfly, water vole and avocets, just to name a few. We stand up for wildlife. So we're the voice for wildlife and wild places across the two counties with the government, and also local authorities and other organisations. We use our experience, evidence and expertise to help to shape decisions and getting the best results for wildlife. And finally, we connect people with wildlife, and that can be through hundreds of events, activities and classes throughout the year, either like more formal through our school education programmes, or more informal kind of holiday activities, weekend activities, giving people of all ages the opportunity to experience and learn about our incredible natural treasures. And also, like, a big part of my role at the minute is more engagement on the nature reserve where I'm based. So a lot of chatting to visitors, highlighting interesting things that are on the reserve, wildlife. It's very nice when wildlife likes to stay in one particular spot and you can label it, and plants and flowers and things, and just trying to connect people and wildlife and people that have maybe discovered us because really of the current situation that we're in as well. So it's been nice to be able to kind of pass everything on to a slightly different audience to one that we maybe previously have been engaging with. So in terms of this particular course, the key learning objectives are to understand the learning and development benefits of holistic play. Sorry, I'm just minimising there we go. Know how to plan for outdoor learning, including the health and safety aspects, and also providing you with a toolkit of low-cost ideas and resources for taking literacy learning outside. So we're going to be looking at the benefits of outdoor learning and how to make the most of them. And then we'll spend most of the session looking at different activities which can be carried out in school grounds to support literacy, but also support other subjects as well. There's quite a lot of kind of cross-curricular links there. I don't know if anybody, this is the second workshop or kind of session similar to this that we've put on. There was one before Christmas on numeracy rather than literacy. So I don't know if anybody did come along to that one as well. There is a little bit of overlap with kind of the first few slides, but then like the activity slides and things are different, where they're kind of focusing on a different subject. So hopefully if you did join us for the previous course, there's not too much overlap there. So benefits of outdoor play. There are lots of benefits to spending time outside. Less than half the time, or children today are spending less than half the time playing outdoors compared to their parents. And they're less likely to spend time outdoors at school. Be interesting to see whether that like spending time outdoors at school does now kind of increase, and there are more opportunities available to children as a result of the past year. So hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to take children out, whether it's further afield or just learning outside on their school grounds. We've become increasingly indoor and sedentary, and really a virtual world, and have kind of removed ourselves a little bit more from the real world. So children outside today. And this has impacted heavily on physical health, as well as emotional well-being, social competence, and also their connection with the natural world and local communities. So hopefully, I know everybody kind of working in the sector knows what the benefits are, and we need to kind of share those and encourage more children outside and parents to let and kind of be at ease with children spending more time outside. So the benefits of outdoor play: physical health, encouraging children to move more, to maybe move differently depending on what space they've got outside, helping them to improve their balance and also their strength and their dexterity and their coordination. If they are given the chance to spend time outside now, then hopefully they are more likely to make greater use of the outside later on in life as they go into adulthood. In terms of performance, outdoor play can improve their performance, kind of their levels and their learning, both outside and also kind of taking it back into the classroom. So learning outside the classroom can contribute significantly to raising standards and improving children's personal, social and emotional development. If they are able to take part more in outdoor activities, it's generally found that they will perform better on achievement tests and improve within the classroom, and also be more interested in what's going on around them, have an improved well-being and lower anger, anxiety and boredom. So giving them that freedom to get outside, play and explore and relax in a different environment. Emotional well-being is another important benefit, and there's a lot of research that demonstrates the positive impact of nature on emotional well-being, as well as the green impact on the brain, which helps develop cognitive abilities in children. Patterns in nature have been shown to reduce stress, and just being outside in a green space can calm children and adults as well down, and just improve that mental well-being. Outdoor play is a brilliant point for learning. It offers different, unique experiences to children. It provides them with a whole range of objects or settings that could become something different, so they can use their imagination more. It enables them to like I said, use their imagination and play and make up games as well, and explore the outside with other children or on their own. It also, play outside encourages them to take risks, and to learn for themselves, learn from their own mistakes, and kind of test things out. So that could be anything from balancing on a log to tree climbing. If you have got nice trees in school grounds, you might not want to let them explore those too high, but giving them a little bit of free rein to explore different features and to challenge themselves and test themselves is a really good way for them to learn. It could also be something like swinging on a swing, especially if that's something that they've put together themselves or they've devised how that's going to work. And then they can take their own risks and make their own decisions a little bit more as well. So giving them a little bit more freedom to try things out. Finally, outdoor play also gives them a really, really good opportunity to connect with wildlife and nature. So as well as taking risks and learning and improving their mental well-being, it allows them to get up and close to different creatures, animals, birds, and to learn about those. And lots of those activities, lots of those kind of discovery activities can then be linked with curriculum or more kind of formal learning. But ultimately, it's encouraging them to kind of open their eyes and see what's out there and learn what's out there, maybe to name level, or maybe just to enjoy experiencing nature and wildlife close up. So they could spend hours investigating mini beasts, they could categorize them, they could make homes for wildlife, or they could tell stories about the birds and the other insects and creatures that they've come across. And hopefully, by giving them that freedom, letting them be outside, that will then foster a love for wildlife and nature that will go on with them through their teenage years and into adulthood. So lots of good positive benefits for outdoor play. In terms of the learning outside, there are 3 different levels attributed to outdoor learning. 1 is learning out of doors, 2 is learning with the outdoors, and 3 is learning through the outdoors. So an example of learning out of doors could just be sitting outside and reading in the sunshine and just being in a different environment and a different environment to the classroom. Learning with the outdoors could be using natural resources outside. So being outside, finding natural items and describing those things, perhaps giving them an alternative use or an alternative name to the real one that we always associate with that item. And learning through the outdoors is getting to know an area really well and being inspired by it. We'd always encourage level 1, even if it's just literally kind of moving the children from the classroom to outside. It's putting them in a different environment, maybe a calmer environment, for them to learn in. This course is mostly focused on number 2 and learning with the outdoors, which can then in time lead on to learning through the outdoors. Outdoor learning, it's worth saying, is not forest school, so it is different to forest school, and it's much more inclusive, because anybody can do it, even if it is just literally going outside to sit and read, away from the classroom, or going outside to do maths. It doesn't matter if it's not a regular programme, it's just kind of picking up the lesson and taking it outside. So it's worth saying that it's not forest school, and it is more readily available, and inclusive. You don't need any special training or qualifications to be able to take children outside the classroom. And when you run an outdoor learning session, it's likely to be for the whole class and could be a one-off experience. So it doesn't have to be focused on a small group, and be repetitive. So it's a really good way of learning because it is open to all, and it doesn't require any training. Every subject can be taken outside, and depending on how you want to look at that subject, it can be more of a lesson. It doesn't necessarily have to be a child-led adventure. It might depend on the children that you're taking out, and their age, their ability, as to how much leading you want them to do of the way the session moves. So it can be child-led, or it can have more of a focus to fit in with whatever you're covering. It does provide opportunities for children to develop many of the same key skills that, for example, forest school does as well. But by focusing still on the learning and the subjects or the criteria that you want to cover, it can still reach the standards set out in the national curriculum and the literacy and numeracy framework. So it's kind of remembering that there is still that underlying focus, and you can take the children outside and still focus on meeting kind of curriculum points, and learning that way. So in terms of preparing for learning outside the classroom, might have seen this before, but this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it starts at the bottom there with physiological needs, and then up to safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. So the hierarchy describes the human needs, and those needs that are lower down on the pyramid need to be met or satisfied before you can then begin to work your way up and look at the needs that are higher up in that pyramid. So at the bottom, things like shelter and food and water and warmth are all basic needs. And if you are not attending to those, so if those basic needs are not met, then you can't even really begin to think about focusing on anything higher up and focusing on things like the learning, improving confidence and connecting with others. So to make sure that those lower physiological needs are met, if you're going to take children outside the classroom, then it's worth preparing for all eventualities, and having a backup plan, being able to risk assess as you kind of carry out the session if things begin to change, but making sure that the group are starting at a level that they're going to kind of achieve something once they're out there. So having a think about the weather, what clothing they are wearing, the site that you're using. Might be a site that you are really familiar with if it is part of the school grounds, but if you are taking them a little bit further, if there's going to be more of a journey for if the weather does change, then you might need to think a little bit more about that and become a bit more familiar about the site that you're going to be using. Whether or not there's any shelter available, how much time you're actually going to be spending outside, health and safety factors, and also how you are going to share ideas and share the learning, and maybe kind of remind them of the learning afterwards as well. So in terms of weather, clothing and site all kind of go together, really. They all work together. Think about the weather and whether or not the children have got appropriate clothing. Things like Wellington boots, or layers if it's wet or cold, things like hats and gloves and waterproofs, and also in the summer, hats to keep them cool, and maybe still long-sleeved t-shirts and trousers, just to make sure that they're not getting too much sun. So having to think about kind of both extremes of weather. And then whether or not the children are coming equipped like that to school, whether parents can provide for their children to make sure that they have the necessary waterproofs, for example, and if not, whether it's something that you can look in to supplying, either through a little bit of fundraising or through the PTA, or things like welly boots, whether parents can donate. Probably goes for waterproofs as well, things that older children have grown out of, and you can start kind of gathering kit, so that you've got spares within the school for the children who perhaps don't have anything. And the same for sun hats, having a drawer maybe of spare sun hats for in the summer if you want to take them outside. And knowing whether or not, probably might depend on school policies, whether children can come with sun cream, or whether that's something that school or whoever can administer, but kind of knowing where you stand with sun protection, and just having a think about that. It's also worth thinking about spare clothing, depending on what they're getting up to when they're outside. They might come back covered in mud or wet through and can't really sit in those clothes necessarily for the rest of the day, or they might have parents who might be a bit uncomfortable with them coming back like that. So as well as perhaps having spare waterproofs, it might be worth having spare changes of clothes within the school, so that they can kind of change and swap around, and not get their bits and bobs too muddy. But yeah, depends on your site and what you've got out there, and what they're going to be doing, really. So staying a little bit with the area, get to know the area, and then you will get to know where are the windy spots, where are the sunny spots, where is it quite exposed, whether or not there's any natural shelter out there for you, or whether you need to add shelter, either in the summer or if it were to be wet. You can also use the weather to your advantage. So get out there and actually experience the different elements, if you can. Ties in with weather quite nicely. But also whether they could just go outside and splash in the puddles and just experience a different way of being outside in those settings. If you don't have anywhere outside that provides good shelter, whether or not there's anywhere that you can add a shelter. So even if it's just a tarp tied to a few trees, be careful with bungees if it's windy. So just have a think about what the conditions are like. If you usually use bungees to tie up a tarp on a nice, calm, sunny day to provide shade, you might want to think about that differently in poorer weather when it's wet and windy out there. So have a think about that. There are, if you wanted to have a look into it, you can find lots of different videos on YouTube and just by searching the internet on how to put up tarps and forest school shelters. And sails are also another good alternative. But just have a think about what kind of shelter you can provide if there isn't anything out there already. In terms of your time spent outside, that is probably going to link or depend very much on the day and the weather, and also possibly the group. And whether or not, have a think about whether you want to be outside during the hottest part of the day or the coldest part of the day, and how long you've possibly got to do something before the children begin to get uncomfortable. Because as soon as they do get cold, or they are struggling in the heat or whichever, then they'll start to lose focus on the activity and what they're doing. So it might be that you can provide a bit extra whilst you're outside, so that you can extend the time spent out there, either by having good shelter for them or providing blankets to keep them warm. Or it might be that you just have to plan around the weather for the day and cut something a little bit short if you need to. Health and safety, definitely worth taking if you can. Depends really on what activities you are doing. But taking something outside for hand washing, if there aren't outside hand washing facilities available, even if it's just a bowl of warm soapy water outside, that will be better than nothing. I should have had a photo on here of one of our tippy taps. But there are lots of, again, if you have a look online, lots of different options for providing hand washing outside. Tippy taps are good because they limit the kind of the amount of contact that the children are spending with the different elements when they're hand washing. But that will help minimize any bacterial infection and just keep them a little bit cleaner, depending on what you are doing. It might also be that a bowl of warm water will just warm them up, warm their hands up in cold conditions, especially if you keep the lid on to keep the water warmer. So depending on what you're doing, it might help you extend your activity time a little bit as well, if they're doing something that they can't necessarily wear gloves to do, then they can just go and warm their hands up for a few minutes, dry them off, and then carry on again. If you've got an outside area, we've got a clay pit at Blashford, which we cover over the summer to keep it a bit damper. So it's worth, oh, excuse me, just gonna have a drink. It's worth thinking about what you're doing with the space outside, and if you are going to encourage the children to dig at all, then you might want to cover that space with a tarp to stop anything else from digging whilst they are not out there, so foxes, badgers, just to kind of control what's using that area a bit. Sharing ideas, it would be really nice to record all the different things that they are doing outside, so that can then be brought back into the classroom, act as a reminder. So have a think about what you're doing outside and how you can capture those different activities. So that might be taking photos, or it might be recording, perhaps writing a journal and kind of keeping notes. But just to have a think about how you can kind of capture what they've been doing, so that they can go back to it a little bit later on. So we will move on now to thinking a bit more specifically about literacy outside. So literacy is the ability to read, write, speak and listen in a way that lets us communicate effectively and make sense of the world and what's around us. It can be indirect, so it could be through hearing and seeing words used in different contexts, for example, just through conversation with adults, or through being read to, or through reading on their own. Or it could be direct through explicit instruction, so either indirect or direct learning. Just being outside in a different environment can be hugely beneficial to helping young children grasp and improve their literacy. And they can learn through looking and finding and listening and describing their experiences. So literacy, it helps with reading, writing, speaking and listening, but I've picked out a few kind of key pointers there. So in terms of developing speech, they can talk about their experiences and they can share information. They can talk about what they have made or they have done and explain the processes behind things. They can extend their ideas or their accounts and include sequences and relevant details. And they can explain information and ideas using relevant vocabulary and supportive resources. In terms of developing their writing, they can use varied and appropriate vocabulary, including subject-specific words and phrases. So by taking literacy outside, you've got natural resources that you can use what's available to explore activities that you might do indoors. So you can find natural objects and use those to describe how things might smell, or they might feel, or they might sound. Chalk or homemade ink or paint could be used for writing. They could just write with chalk on the playground, or you could do a little bit of research and make blackberry ink or oak gall ink, or crush up charcoal and mix it with water and use that on paper or fabric whilst outside. You could use the outside as a setting for a story. You could use plants and trees to stimulate the imagination and to start a discussion, or as a base for writing and poetry. There is crossover to other areas of the curriculum, and kind of art is a good one, and kind of like the creative arts in terms of kind of using materials and making things whilst out there, and them using their imagination. So we've got some activities that we will run through now in a little bit more detail. Storytelling is a really good one, and it does give a lot of opportunities as well. So I've got a few slides on storytelling, a few different options. So storytelling is a key form of communication. It's really good for relaxation and for mental well-being, and it helps children develop their speaking, their listening, their reading and their writing skills. At the same time, it can stimulate the imagination and curiosity, and taking it outdoors can add an extra dimension to the story, especially if a location similar to the story is used. So it might be that you have got a story that you want to cover, and you're just going to read that existing story with them. You could take that story to a location relevant to the plot or the characters. They could take it in turns to read the different sections aloud, and they could act out the story in the space, or have a go at the different activities that are happening throughout the story and talk about or describe them. They then might want to go on to discuss how the characters might be feeling in the space, and also how they are feeling outside in that different location as well. The story on here, might be able to tell by the picture, is Stickman, which is one that we do with our wildlife tots groups. Very lucky at Blashford, we have a nice mix of habitats on the reserve, so we can play poo sticks at the river. But it might be that you could do something differently with kind of floating, or just water in tanks or bowls to do some kind of watery activity. We make salt dough so that they can make little salt dough snowmen. We have done fire lighting with them before as well, but that would depend on you and your site and how comfortable you were to have a little campfire during that time. We make little birds' nests using sticks and twigs and things, and take sand out so that they can make a little sandcastle as the beach. So that was all, I think, in completely the wrong order, but you can have a look at the story, take out activities that are achievable where you are or with whatever resources you have, and then let the children explore those activities so that they're kind of acting out the story or taking part in the story a little bit more than just reading about it. You could adapt a story instead of reading one. If there's a topic or a subject that you want to cover, and there's a story that maybe ties in or could link to that quite well, then you could have a look at adapting that story. So we have got a version of The Three Little Pigs, which is used to explore materials with them. And then that story's been adapted to fit in with material related activities. So we play meter stone. They make nests We make little rush boats, and then they have a go at floating those. And then they can use clay to do clay thumb pot modelling. So kind of exploring some of the different natural materials out there and their uses. And then also something a bit more kind of man-made, and to get them thinking, is giving them a tray of different materials and then asking them to sort those materials according to their different characteristics, and explaining why they've sorted those materials in the way that they have done. So again, that story can just be read outside, and then you could use different locations for the different activities. And it doesn't necessarily matter if the locations don't really tie in with the story, but if they're just kind of changing, a little bit of a change of scenery and moving around in between activities, then it will just kind of keep them engaged throughout. And then they can talk about them, describe them, say what they've enjoyed, and get creative and explore the different materials that are out there. They could also have a go at creating their own story. So have a look at the space that you've got available and the space that you are going to be using, and then they can find objects within that space, so whatever catches their eye, have a closer look at those and explore how they feel, or they look, or perhaps how they smell. They could have a think about the different items and what those items could be if they weren't what they actually are. So a little leaf could be a fairy boat, or an acorn could be a pixie hat. And then come up with a story using those items that they found, and including some of the ideas for the other things that those items could be. They could either do that individually and then tell their friend, or try and convince their friend that that item is actually what they're saying it is. Or they could create a story together as a group, and each person kind of add on to the story, using their item, to make it longer, and just see where that story then takes you as a class, with each child adding on to it. It's a good one to do because they can just find things that are out on the ground, and then you could either ask them to just find loose items, or if there's something nearby, they could maybe still kind of stand by it and include that in the story without, for example, necessarily picking a certain flower or something, but just getting them to use their imagination and have a look around them, and use that to create a story. So moving away from the options of storytelling, another thing that you could do whilst outside is creating a journey stick. Doesn't necessarily have to be a journey stick. It could turn into a story stick, or it could turn into, at the end, a mobile with the different items that they've collected. But message sticks have been used to convey information. So you could use that stick to represent either a little walk around the grounds, or just to represent exploring a certain area. Maybe don't have to move from one bit to the next in a certain order. But what they need to do is just have a look for natural items that catch their eye, and then add things to the stick as they go. Things like leaves or feathers or seeds. It's a really nice creative activity to do, and they can then, it's interesting to see which items kind of spark their interest and they are drawn to. and then they can recount by looking at that stick and the different items that they've attached to it. They can then recount that journey or that experience afterwards and kind of explain what they've collected and what they've added. It's a good activity, doesn't need much equipment or anything either. You just need lots of short lengths of string or wool so that they can tie things onto the stick, and either bind them on or have them hanging off. So writing outside can be kind of links quite nicely with art, and it can be, I guess, really what you'd like to make of it, depending on resources that are available, how much time you've got, and whether you've got time to kind of make your own inks or pigments. So it could just be taking some chalk outside, having an area of the playground or a tarmac area, and then letting them use the chalk to write, so that they're just writing in a different way, in a different environment. Or if you've got a bit more time, then you could have a go at making your own paints or inks. So either just by kind of mashing and mixing up either clay or charcoal or chalk with water, so that you've got a more kind of paint, watery, inky solution. Or you could have a go at making blackberry ink or ink from oak galls, or even have a go with, I think the bigger stems are better, but thick dandelion stems, and making an invisible ink, or an ink that starts off invisible and then as it dries it slowly gets a little bit browner, and then they can kind of see what they've written down. And then that can be on either paper or fabric, or just on the ground. You could also try, instead of using paintbrushes, they could try kind of scribing with a stick, with a bit of a point on it as well. If you wanted to have a go at something quite natural for the whole process, or they could make a paintbrush with a stick and some pine needles, and bind them on the end to turn it into a brush. Another activity that's good for kind of giving instructions and listening is getting them to create a treasure hunt or a trail, and then they can have a go at practicing with directional and positional vocabulary. They could set trails for each other in pairs or in groups, and then they can test whether the other group is able to locate either the treasure or the finish point based on their instructions or their symbols that they've created to help the other group move from one point to the next. Doesn't necessarily have to have a map. It can be as involved as you'd like it to be, but you might want cloth or paper so that they can put together a map or a key. And then have a think about materials that could be used to set a trail. So could use leaves or sticks. Sticks are quite good for making shapes, for kind of pointing in the right direction. Bird seed, if they're kind of following a little bit of a trail, or stones. The only thing really to bear in mind is maybe the weather on the day. So if it is really windy and they use lots of leaves, then they might find that their trail disappears quite quickly. So just having a little think about materials and which ones to use for setting the trail. But it's a fun activity to do, and it could then link in with a foreign language. So it could then have a go at setting the trail in French, depending on what other languages they are studying, and have a go at practicing some different vocabulary as well. Tree faces is a very nice one for letting them really use their imagination and having a look at what's around them. Tree faces is a good thing. It kind of focuses what they're making, if they're maybe not too sure, but it might be that stemming on from that, they could do something a bit more kind of free form and sculptural, and have a go at making something else instead. But tree faces is a really nice thing to start with, and then they can choose the tree that they're going to incorporate their face into. Have a think about whether if there are any features that they want to use already on that tree, and then gather materials to create their clay face. They can then have a look and assign a character to that face, and then maybe tell you whether the tree is tired, whether it's angry, whether it's wise, or whether it's kind. And then could also have a little bit of a think or do some research into the origins of tree faces, and examples of talking trees can be found in Greek mythology and literature, or they could also have a think about gargoyles and the Green Man as well, and just do a little bit of thinking and research. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a tree face if they don't want to physically stick something on there. I think it was a hippogriff. I think whoever made that one had been watching Harry Potter, knew exactly what he wanted to make when we were doing clay sculptures, and made a winged mythical creature that he was very proud of. So it doesn't have to be something on attached to a tree, but it just really lets them use their imagination to have a go at sculpting and creating, and then they can talk about it afterwards. It's a nice one to make sure that those are kind of captured or recorded. So take photos of them, or they could maybe draw a sketch of what they made, and then they could be left up for others to enjoy. Although they do eventually fall off the tree, unfortunately, but a nice one to kind of find outside on the grounds, or come across ones that have been left by others. They could also have a go at doing outdoor number poems. So you could put the children into small groups, and then for this one you would then number the children. So if you had a group of 5, you would number them 1 to 5, and then number ones would have to find 1 natural object, bring it back to the group. Number 2s would have to find 2 natural objects, so 2 of the same thing, and bring it back, and so on. Doesn't necessarily have to be something that they could physically bring back. I put my example down there, and they definitely couldn't bring back a pond or some goldfinch. Might be able to bring you back some spiders, but can kind of depend, and they can just use what's out there that they can see or maybe kind of point to. And then with their items that they found, they then need to lay out a phrase so that they have their number, then an adjective, then alliteration, and and a noun, so the thing that they found, and then they could write that. They could either use chalk to write that on tarmac, or they could just write it down in books, but kind of using the outside to explore and have a think about creating simple poems, and kind of expanding their vocabulary as well, and having a think about how things seem to them, so how they're going to describe different things. It's a good starting point for poetry as well, so could then kind of go on to more in-depth poetry. And then they could have a go at rhyming verses, or they could have a go at haiku, and they could also have a think. The Lost Words book ties in really well with looking outside at what's out there, and flowers and wildlife, and then kind of creating poems around those, and it's so beautifully illustrated that it's a good point to hopefully encourage them, stimulate the imagination, and get them kind of thinking about those different items. And then they could also have a think about seasons, and the time of day and night. So it might be that they could have a challenge of writing a poem about what goes on wildlife wise within the school grounds after they've all gone home, at dusk and overnight. Right, so last kind of proper look at activities just covers sensory activities, so encouraging them to look and touch and smell and listen, depending on where you are and what you've got growing in the school grounds. Might be able to do taste, if you've got a useful blackberry bush, some brambles or something, and you are confident that you know what you are tasting. But lots of different sensory activities, and then they can use descriptive words to describe the natural items, and tell you what they found. They don't need a huge amount of equipment, colour chips, or you could just like cut up like the paint cards for different kind of colour cards, cups and potion for making smelly cocktails, sound map. They could just cup their hands behind their ears and kind of pull their ears forward to amplify the sounds that are going on around them. And then depending on the age, they could have a go at maybe drawing a sound map, so putting a cross on a piece of card for where they are, and then having a go at drawing the different sounds that they can hear, and trying to kind of draw the direction that sound is in as well. And then egg cartons are good for collecting textures, and they can try and get different textures in each of the segments within the egg carton. So it's a nice one to do with younger children. And a few kind of last activities on there that we will go through. We're just having a look at the time. I think we're okay for time. So I haven't gone into quite as much detail on these ones, but a few other things that you could do whilst outside. And they could have a go at putting together a nature journal, which covers observing, drawing, writing, describing, so they can kind of annotate what's in there. Might be nice to have a book that was just for that, or just for kind of the outside experiences, and then it would be cross curriculum as well, and would draw in elements of art and other subjects, they could have a go at documenting the weather, kind of writing what it's like outside on that day when they're out looking, document the changing seasons, and having a closer look at the wildlife and the plants that are out there. A to Z journey, some of it might be a little bit of a challenge, but encouraging them to find something that they either see or smell or touch for every letter of the alphabet. So that's quite a nice one. Might be a few letters that will make them think a little bit more, or they might have to do a bit more research to kind of find something. Blindfold trail, or the meter tree activity, where they are blindfolded and then led to a partner to find a tree. They can have a good feel of it, and then they're led away, and then they need to go and pick that tree out again once they've had the blindfold taken off. Good for giving and following instructions. So whoever's leading, either if it's on a blindfold trail or meter tree, kind of directs them, walk forward 5 steps, or step to the left or step to the right. Encourage them to warn their partner if there's something for them to step over on the ground. And it also builds trust between the children as well. So it's a good activity to do outside. Talking tokens is using natural materials to facilitate debate. So it might be, if there's a question that you want the class to discuss, that you kind of take that outside, get them to all sit in a circle, and then they can go and find a natural object or a couple of natural objects, bring those back to the circle. The question would then get posed to the class, and then the children could only talk when they put one of their tokens in the centre of the circle. So kind of encouraging them to listen to others whilst they are talking, and kind of take their turn. But it's also, they can respond to the question by saying that they agree or they disagree, and then saying why. But it kind of, because you're using the tokens to be able to talk, it depersonalizes the debate a little bit more. So it kind of encourages the children to react to the item that's being used, instead of reacting to the person who kind of put that forwards. So it's just a different way of holding a discussion. And holding it outside can help them think about what they want to say or how they want to respond, and it can encourage them to relax and take the heat out of any disagreements, and also gain the confidence to contribute if they're all kind of taking it in turns and using the token to be able to talk. And finally, natural phonics is just an activity that uses natural items to explore different sounds. So you could decide on a sound that you wanted to explore, and then create a key with the children where a different natural item replaces the different spellings of the word. So it might be that you use a leaf to represent oo, and a stick to represent you. Gonna get the sounds all a bit wrong now. And a seed to represent o, and then you would write out the word but leave blanks, and then use that natural item to fill in the blank. and then the children can have a guess at what words have been written, and hopefully fill in the gaps to spell the word correctly. And then they could have a go at doing it for themselves, so they could work in little groups to write words or sentences using the key and see what they can come up with. So getting the most out of literacy outside. Natural resources are brilliant. So there's a lot out there that could stimulate the learning, stimulate the imagination, and kind of start the conversation or start the focus of the activity. So they're free, they're tactile, and you can explore different concepts in a different way to how you would maybe explore them in the classroom. There are links with other subjects, so could link in with language, for example, for the kind of treasure trail activity. Lots of links with art, in terms of kind of like the clay faces and giving them kind of characteristics and personalities, or just exploring the different materials. And they're quite kind of simple and straightforward to do. So just kind of playing with clay or using wool. It might be that you've got a stash of wool in the art department, or you can ask parents to maybe donate items like wool or paintbrushes, pots and fabric. And just being outside, it encourages them to collaborate and work together, depending on which activities they're taking part in, and also to kind of develop their vocabulary just by explaining what they're doing to each other, and what they've made or what they found or what they're looking at. So just being outside in a different environment can be hugely beneficial in helping children to kind of grasp and improve their literacy. And they can learn so much through looking and finding and listening, and also describing their experiences. So it's a brilliant place to be, and depending on what you've got outside, that might lend itself nicely to certain activities, or it might be that you can have a look and see if there is anywhere within walking distance, or if there are kind of simple things that you can bring in to kind of encourage a bit more variety of activities, or have a few more options for things that they can have a go at doing. So we have just got a few slides about the South Downs National Park Authority, and they have funded the development of the training sessions through our South Downs Education Network. The Hampshire Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, we're a member of the network, and the network is a collective of over 100 different education sites, centres and practitioners based in and around the national park that deliver different activities for schools and other groups, so that they can better understand the special qualities of its protected landscape. The network offers settings or context for locally relevant curriculum for your school if you're local to the area, and they offer a range of, members of the network can also offer a range of trips and outreach sessions where they can come to the school to teach groups rather than you having to go to them. and also online sessions and downloadable teaching resources. So if it's something of interest, do get in touch with them as part of your planning and see if they can kind of support or help you as much as possible. I would imagine, I think a lot of things, hopefully at some point, will kind of slowly start to get back to normal. I think the only thing on there is possibly residential trips. Not sure how long it might take for something like that to be able to happen again. But yes, but lots of different opportunities there. So both children and staff can benefit from learning outside the classroom, exploring different environments and being exposed to nature and having different hands-on positive learning opportunities. Like, we do understand that trips to the national park or to other providers like nature reserves like ourselves, they're not necessarily going to take place on a weekly basis. But hopefully by taking part in this training session, you're interested in building learning outside the classroom into the school's curriculum, and hopefully it's helped in some way, and it's given you some kind of low cost ideas and just kind of a bit of background thinking to help you take children outside of the classroom, even if it's just onto your grounds within the school. We do believe that understanding more about the national park, from its nature to the different recreation opportunities, and also to jobs and people that work there, is an important part of young people's development, because they will be part of that landscape as they grow older, not just whilst at school, but for the rest of their lives. And there are some key kind of websites and contact details there as well, but you can find all these details and listings of the education centres and providers on the South Downs National Park website. So definitely worth having a look if you are local. And they also do a travel grant, which allows schools who have over 10% of their pupils eligible for free school meals to claim back the travel costs up to £300 when visiting a site or centre in the national park, which could be hugely beneficial or hugely helpful if you're trying to organise a trip out, because I know transport is a bit pricey, so it's worth looking into if you can. It's also worth having a look and checking in with your local authority outdoor education advisor, because they will also offer educational visit coordinator training and a range of help and guidance when it comes to the practical matters around planning trips and thinking about health and safety considerations, risk assessments for taking children outdoors, and also compliance. Brilliant. So that's my links and resources slide. There's a bit of kind of a few general links on there. So the trust and things like our watch group and websites for if you want to find more about plants or birds or mini beasts, and also a few literacy links, as well as kind of like the wider ones. Those will be on the handout, so we will send those round to you, so don't have to sit and write them all down. And the other thing that is also on the handout, if you'd like to do a little bit of further reading around the subject, there's a few different kind of books on there. Again, some of them are more kind of literacy based and some of them are a bit more kind of general activities and things. And again, those are on the handout, so you'll have details of those when we email that round later. I won't talk about them in lots of detail because I'm aware we've got about 10 minutes left. And we probably need a little bit of time for questions if we do, but yes, I'll leave those up on there, and perhaps we will do some questions if anybody has got any.
Thanks,
Sorry
Tracy. Sorry, I was just going to say there are only a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if you've seen at all, but so Beverly asked about sticking the clay onto the trees and whether you have any top tips for keeping it on the trees.
That's a good one, and it's nice to watch them evolve and age, I think, over time. It's better if it's wetter. So if you can kind of, depending on how you make it, make sure the back bit is maybe wetter, damper, ickier, so that stays on. And then what is quite good is if you can kind of smooth the edges out a little bit, so kind of pull the clay down. I don't know if I can might be able to find that slide, so that you're kind of spreading the clay out and onto the tree trunk a bit more, and then they tend to stay on a little bit more if you can do that to it. Oh yeah, there we go. So like the ones along the bottom look quite good, so they've kind of, the clay's been like smudged and pulled out so that it sticks on the tree a bit better, rather than just whacking a lump on and hoping that it stays. Made a lot of clay faces.
Excellent.
Cool.
The other one is Alex asks whether the numeracy course is also on the YouTube channel. I assume it is.
Yeah, I'm assuming it is. So yeah. So it should be, because this one should be going up on there. So yes, it should be on there.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But there are no other questions in the chat box. So that was very easy. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask now? Feel free to unmute and ask away if you do, or any comments.
I just wanted to say I found it very helpful, really. I am actually a forest school leader, but I also do outdoor curriculum. But even with that, I've learned quite a lot from what you've gone through today. Thank you.
Oh, good. That's nice, because it's always, you're never really sure. When you do things day in, day out, or a lot of, you kind of take it for granted almost a little bit. So that's good to know that you picked up a few ideas. And I do apologise about almost losing my voice partway through. That wasn't supposed to happen at all. But I'd never make it as an online or as a teacher, probably.
I love your little dog as well, Tracy.
Oh yeah, he yawned a couple of times. I think I ignored that, and we probably stuck his bottom up. Bless him.
You've just got lots of other thank yous in the chat, but I don't see any other questions. So yeah, lovely activity. So that was good. Thank you, Tracy.
Excellent. Brilliant. We kind of finished on time.
We have, yeah. So if there are no other questions, and I always say to people, if you think of anything afterwards, we're always happy for you to email if you've got any questions at a later date. Great. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.